Welcome to our latest episode. Today we're diving into some pretty explosive territory about the very foundation of Christianity.
I'm really excited and a bit nervous to jump into this discussion.
Right. So, here's the kicker. There's an argument that challenges the entire narrative we know about the Apostle
Interesting.
Paul, that his letters, his conversion, his whole persona might just be, well, a fabrication.
Wait, so you're saying that the guy we all revere, the Paul who laid the theological groundwork for so much of Christianity, might not have even existed?
Exactly. A group of 19th century scholars, the Dutch radicals, proposed that not only were his letters forged in the 2nd century, but that his persona was, in effect, a literary device crafted to serve a theological purpose.
Right.
Can you believe that?
That's wild. So, in essence, if Paul's writings are not authentic, then what exactly are we left with? Just, a sort of crafted myth?
Yep, it's basically saying that Christianity's core, a lot of which is built on Paul's teachings like salvation by faith, justification by grace, is not divine truth at all, but literary fiction.
Yeah, that really flips things on their head. How do these Dutch radicals back up that claim? It sounds extremely radical, if not dangerous.
They base their argument on a detailed textual and stylistic analysis. They pointed out inconsistencies in Paul's letters. Sometimes they sound Jewish, sometimes anti-Jewish, sometimes emphasizing celibacy, and other times seeming indifferent to marriage. It's like reading multiple voices in one document.
And what about the Acts of the Apostles? I've heard that plays a key part in this argument, too.
Absolutely. The Dutch radicals argued that Acts is not a historical account, but rather a carefully constructed theological novel. It paints Paul as this miracle-working, sermon-spouting figure bridging Judaism and Hellenism, but they claim it's all propaganda, designed to unify disparate Christian factions like the Jewish followers of James and the Gentile followers of Paul.
Right, that would definitely be a game changer. So if Acts is a work of fiction, then the narrative we've known is just a cover story, carefully designed to legitimize a new version of Christianity?
Exactly, and that means early Christianity wasn't necessarily birthed by a once-converted Pharisee going door to door to preach to Gentiles. Instead, it suggests that the religion emerged from anonymous writers who were trying to shape a cohesive theology decades after the actual events.
That's pretty radical. And it does raise the question, if there's no historical Paul, then how do we explain the profound impact of his letters on, say, Protestant theology?
That's the intriguing part. See, a lot of key doctrines, from grace to faith and even the idea that the law is abolished, are all, well, adaptations from what we attribute to Paul. If Paul is just a literary invention, then it shakes the very foundations of those theological principles.
It would be like pulling the rug out from under centuries of tradition. But, don't you think there's a risk of overcorrecting here? I mean, it's one thing to question whose writings are older or newer, but to dismiss an entire historical figure sounds like, it could be, well, a bit of a leap?
That's a valid concern. I mean, we have to be cautious. The Dutch radicals weren't casually dismissing Paul. They based their conclusions on linguistic analysis and historical context. But of course, it's not like they've provided hard, irrefutable evidence that he never existed.
True.
They're challenging long-held assumptions, not rewriting history by magic.
Right? It does seem like a case where the methodology, along with inherent biases of the period, could have influenced their conclusions.
Absolutely. There's always that risk. The Dutch radicals, like Allard Pierson, Abraham Dirk Loman, and Willem Christian van Manen, were working in a time when biblical criticism was just beginning to take a more modern form. Their work, while meticulous, was also revolutionary enough to be labeled as dangerous by the church
revolutionary
at the time.
Indeed. And how has this perspective evolved in more recent times?
In recent years, scholars like Robert Price, Thomas Brodie, and Richard Carrier have kind of reopened this debate with more advanced scholarly tools. They're asking the same fundamental questions. What if Paul never existed as we think? What if the New Testament is more a crafted myth than a factual account?
That's a profound question. If I understand correctly, this means that even our timeline of early Christianity might have to be reevaluated?
Exactly. If Paul's letters were written much later, perhaps even after Marcion's Gospel, and Paul's persona is a construction designed to tie together competing factions, then our entire chronology of early Christian development gets, disrupted.
That's seriously mind-blowing. And, historical consensus on Paul's existence is not just a minor detail, but totally central to how we understand modern Christian doctrine, right?
Right, it's like the keystone in an arch. Remove it and everything might collapse, or at least be forced into a whole new configuration. If Paul is a literary device instead of, a historical figure, then Protestant theology, and maybe even other branches, could be built on what turns out to be a beautifully orchestrated narrative rather than divine truth.
Yeah, that analogy hits home. I'm curious, though. Do you think this view, that Paul might be entirely fictional, holds a chance of gaining mainstream academic acceptance?
Well, here's where things get a bit tricky. While these ideas are fascinating, they're still on the fringe for many scholars. Most
I
of
can
the
see that.
academic community still holds traditional views, partly because the evidence is, well, ambiguous and open to interpretation.
Yeah. It definitely seems like a classic case of how groundbreaking ideas can be brushed aside, or even buried, if they challenge long-standing beliefs.
Absolutely. Those Dutch radicals essentially were ahead of their time. Their work was controversial enough that it got mocked and forgotten by mainstream religious institutions. Yet, the conversation refuses to die.
Right. So, what's your take? Do you lean towards accepting that Paul might be a literary construct? Or do you see strong indications of an actual historical figure behind the texts?
Honestly, I think it's a mix. I mean, while the textual inconsistencies and the context in which these writings emerged make a strong case for literary creation, there's also a lot of historical resonance that many find compelling. It's like trying to distinguish between a well-crafted myth and actual lived experience.
It's a fine line for sure. And don't you find it a bit ironic that perhaps the most influential figure in Christianity might be nothing more than a, well-executed narrative device?
Absolutely, it's ironic, like
Yeah.
it's almost poetic. A narrative so powerful that even questioning it shakes the entire structure of belief that stood for over 2 millennia.
But here's my concern. If we start accepting these contested views too readily, don't we risk dismissing the contributions of those whose teachings, fictional or not, have shaped millions of lives and cultures?
That's a solid critique. It's important to remember that even if Paul's persona is a literary construct, the ideas attributed to him have had a profound impact on society. The debate is less about erasing those contributions and more about understanding where they came from and how they were shaped.
Right, contextualizing history is crucial. It's just, really mind-expanding to think that our foundational stories might be far more complex and possibly more, human than we ever imagined.
For sure. And that's why this discussion remains so provocative. It pulls back the curtain on what we think is sacred and asks us to re-examine the stories that have defined civilization.
Exactly. Well, this has been an enlightening ride through some truly controversial territory. I'm sure folks will be mulling over these ideas for a long time.
Absolutely. Remember, questioning is the first step towards deeper understanding, even if it shakes the very ground of tradition. Thanks for sticking with me through this wild exploration.
Thanks for the conversation. It's definitely given me a lot to think about.